It was Ryan's idea to explore the old Havensworth Theater. Once a local legend and a cultural hub, it had been sitting abandoned for decades. The town had moved on, new theaters opened, but the sounds about Havensworth never quite died. People said it was haunted, that the plays never really ended. I didn't believe in any of that, but it was Friday night, and we were all looking for something to do. We gathered at the edge of the theater's crumbling facade, where ivy had taken over, like creeping fingers clutching onto forgotten relics. Ryan flashed his usual mischievous grin, shrugging off the unnerving aura around the place. Sarah, the ever-ready thrill-seeker, bounced on her toes, flashlight in hand. Dan, arms crossed, gave a small nod. He was never one to back down from a challenge, especially when Ryan was involved. "You guys ready for the show?" Ryan snickered, jostling the rusted lock on the main entrance. Sarah shivered a little, but her voice was firm. "Let's see what the fuss is about." After a few attempts, Ryan pried the door open with a loud creak that seemed to echo into some unfathomable depth. The air inside was thick with dust, just as I expected, and it hit us with a staleness that made me cough. We switched on our flashlights and stepped inside, the beams slicing through the darkness. Our footsteps reverberated through the grand lobby, where faded crimson carpets absorbed the sound like a shroud. Gilded sconces lined the walls, eyes of the past watching us intrude upon their silence. Velvet ropes remained limp barriers leading to nowhere, and moldy, ornate mirrors reflected only fragments of light. "This place must have been beautiful once," Sarah said, her voice hushed, almost reverent. Ryan snorted, "Yeah, if you like dusty old stuff." We walked deeper into the building, past cracked marble statues, whose features were softened by the years of neglect, until we reached the main auditorium. The door opened with a groan that seemed almost too loud in the stillness. Rows upon rows of plush red seats spread before us in semicircles, facing an empty stage where worn curtains hung like forgotten promises. As our lights danced across the room, we looked for anything that might unravel the mysteries said about this place. It was then that I heard it, a faint rustle, like the audience settling in for a performance. My breath caught for a second, but I brushed it off as a draft playing tricks. Ryan laughed. "I bet it's just rats." The thought didn't ease the tension in my chest. Dan glanced at me and shrugged, as if to say, "What did we expect?" Curiosity overpowered caution, and we approached the stage. Dust motes whirled in the light, as if disturbed by something unseen. My heart thudded loudly in my ears when I noticed the stage was clean, too clean. There wasn't even a speck of dust to match the rest of the theater's decay. "Look at that," Sarah pointed, stepping towards the stage with a growing bravado. "It's spotless." "Kind of weird, huh?" I muttered, still trying to make sense of it. Ryan dismissed it with a wave. "Maybe someone's been squatting here. People are strange, you know." He jumped onto the stage with a clumsy leap and pretended to bow to an invisible audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, his voice bouncing back from the darkness. A chill slithered down my spine, unrelated to the cold air. And then they came. The sounds. Applause soft at first, like a whisper on the wind, then growing more pronounced, as if an invisible audience was responding to Ryan's declaration. We all froze, our flashlights casting frantic beams of light through empty air. Ryan's bravado melted into nervous laughter, but it died quickly when he realized what the rest of us were hearing. The applause wasn't coming from any discernible source, not from speakers or offstage. It was around us, impossible and intruding. "What the hell?" Dan breathed, eyes wide. The clapping ceased in an instant, the silence rushing back in with a force that seemed to press on our eardrums. Sarah gasped, clutching my arm. Her face was pale, matching the tense unease swirling in my gut. John had heard the stories. An abandoned theater, once vibrant with life, now stood on the outskirts of town like a forgotten relic. Rumors swirled about strange happenings, tales of plays unfolding with no actors, scripts whispering through the air. Curiosity gnawed at him, so one chilly autumn evening, he decided to see for himself. The theater's exterior was a crumbling facade of chipped stone and shattered windows. Vegetation clawed its way through every crack, but the door, surprisingly intact, creaked open at his touch. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with the scent of old velvet and dust. The foyer was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through broken windows. Posters from decades past adorned the walls, announcing long-forgotten performances. But what drew John's attention was the sound, a soft, almost imperceptible murmur wafting from the main auditorium. He edged open the heavy auditorium doors. The murmur crescendoed into a cacophony of voices, layered over each other like a deranged symphony. Yet, the stage, spotlighted in ghostly glow, was empty. Rows of seats stretched out in shadows before him, but they were devoid of life. Driven by a mix of fascination and dread, John ventured further inside. As he approached the stage, he swore he felt eyes on him, though the theater was empty. The voices intensified, morphing into lines from plays he vaguely recognized, yet never seen performed. He noticed something peculiar. The rows of seats were subtly shifting, forming different aisles as if guiding him to a specific spot. Each step felt heavier, the air more oppressive. Eventually, he was funneled to a seat marked with a crude X scratched into the wood. Compelled, he sat. The moment he did, silence crushed the air. The stage lights flickered and shadows deepened. Then, without warning, the stage filled with an ethereal fog, shapes swirling within. The murmurs returned, now clear and synchronized, performing a play written in agony and despair. John tried to stand, but his body refused. The seat gripped him with an unseen force. Panic surged as the room's temperature plummeted. His breath became visible in the frigid air. He watched the spectral play, scenes of betrayal and revenge unfolding in chilling clarity. Suddenly, he noticed another rule of this twisted theater. The scenes repeating were not just random plays, but dark echoes of reality. The stories on stage began mirroring his own life, pieces of his past he'd rather forget. Secrets he thought buried now paraded before him. The environment turned hostile. The walls seemed to close in, sounds now directed at him, hissing his fears, his failures. The spotlight swung towards him, blinding and judgmental. Sweat trickled down his face despite the cold. Time lost meaning as John endured the relentless parade of accusations. He realized he was part of the theater's grotesque performance, trapped in an unending loop of his darkest moments. Desperate, he fought against the invisible grip. The more he struggled, the tighter the theater held him, feeding on his growing dread. His voice, hoarse from shouting, was absorbed into the theater's sinister chorus. And then, as if reaching a climax, the fog enveloped the stage completely, leaving nothing but a deafening silence. For a moment, John thought he glimpsed shadowy figures in the fog, their eyes piercing into his soul, judging. With a final surge of will, he managed to break free from the seat's grasp. Stumbling backward, he tripped over the steps, landing hard on the aisle's floor. Pain lanced through him, but the shock freed him from his paralysis. He scrambled up, mind screaming for escape. The theater, sensing its prey slipping away, retaliated. The doors he'd entered slammed shut, barriers of darkness pressing in. The spectral voices rose again, a crescendo of loss and longing. John charged through the pitch-black, breath-ragged, heart-pounding. He threw his weight against the door, which groaned and then relented. He burst into the night, collapsing on the damp grass outside, gulping fresh air, the sounds fading. The theater loomed silently behind him, its secrets and horrors concealed once more. John lay there trembling, grateful for the chill outside, thankful for its grounding reality. As he gathered himself to leave, he realized the theater was no mere ghost story. It was a curse, a stage where the past played on repeat, feeding on fear, never truly letting go. He dared not look back as he made his way home, each step guided by the resolve never to return, his own unwanted scenes forever etched in memory. Emma stood at the edge of the abandoned theater, its facade crumbling, yet somehow majestic. Each of the town's sounds led her here, claiming the theater came alive at night. Determined to debunk the mystery, or perhaps just discover it, she pushed the creaky door open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and echoes of bygone performances. Rows of red velvet seats, now faded to a dull maroon, faced the grand stage, where a tattered curtain hung like a ghost draped across the planks. Emma pulled her flashlight from her backpack, its beam cutting through the darkness. She had heard stories growing up, how performances played out every midnight without a single actor on stage. It was a lonely place, where the walls remembered but no longer cared to retell their tales. But Emma was here to listen, to understand what kept the plays going. As the clock edged closer to midnight, Emma sat in the front row, camera ready, expecting nothing more than silence. But then, as if cued by an unseen director, the theater began to hum. The floorboards creaked under the weight of invisible footsteps, and the curtain stirred, rising slowly. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her logical mind screamed hoax, yet her senses painted a different story. The stage was now alive with the semblance of life actors who weren't there, voices that had no origin, yet the play unfolded with eerie precision. Emma recognized the script, an old tragedy about love lost and found too late. Despite herself, she was drawn in, her emotions swaying with the unseen actor's dialogue. As the final act neared, a shadow emerged, ethereal yet distinctly human. It approached the edge of the stage, locking its hollow eyes onto Emma. Fear rooted her to the seat, but curiosity pried her gaze upwards. It gestured her forward, as if inviting her onto the stage. With trembling steps, Emma walked to the foot of the stage. The shadow's presence was palpable, a cold embrace that beckoned her to cross the threshold into its world. She stepped up, the old wood groaning beneath her weight, and felt an unnatural chill seep through her skin. The shadow enveloped her, and suddenly Emma was within the play. She stood among the unseen actors, a part of the spectacle she once only observed. Instinctively, she found her lines, words she'd never learned yet somehow knew, spilling from her lips. The play reached its climax, and Emma saw the purpose behind the theater's ghostly ritual. It was not merely a replay of an old performance, but a bridge, a means to keep memories alive, to narrate stories forgotten by time. Each night, it sought someone to grant these echoes form and voice. As the final curtain fell, the shadow released her, granting her a choice. Emma could stay, become a part of the eternal narrative, or return to her world forever changed. Knowing what she did now, The thought of an unending performance, of joining the theater's cadre, both haunted and enticed her. She stepped back off the stage, feeling the weight of choice. The ghostly audience silenced, waiting. Emma understood that stories had power, and here she had found a story worth telling. Yet, she also craved the world beyond these walls, the tangible existence of life unfettered by eternal repetition. As Emma left the theater, the doors closed behind her with a sigh, the air clear and reality vivid. She carried the story with her, a secret heavy with meaning. The theater would wait, still craving voices, but Emma had chosen to live to share not just the theater's secret, but to create her own stories. Outside, the sun began to rise, and she knew she'd return someday, not as an observer, but as a storyteller ready to weave her own tale into the fabric of the theater's living history. Until then, the legacy of plays without actors continued, an endless cycle of memory and imagination.